My husband Dave and I had a daughter in April, Gracie Lou, as Wayne said, and she lived for 10 days. And so I'm going to just be talking to you guys about kind of what has happened since then, what happened during that time, and how God has been faithful to us in all of that. I've broken my testimony into different sections, which are just thank you God's. And the first one that I would like to say thank you the Lord for is thank you God for life. I was 26 weeks along. I had just been put on bed rest. And then a Thursday night, I had cramping in my whole body all night long, and I just went, "Ooh, this is not good." I thought I was maybe just dehydrated, and after calling my sister and a doctor, they said, "Why don't you just go in?" So Dave and I drove to the hospital, and when we got there, they said, "This is not good. The baby's only measuring 22 weeks, and the baby's going to be born today." As they were talking to us, they kind of explained, because the baby is measuring small, she was just 22, she was measuring 22 weeks, they said, "We don't know that the baby's going to live. We'll do a 2-minute assessment, and if we think she can make it, we'll do everything we can to help her survive, and if not, then we'll just lay the baby on your chest and she can pass away." And so we heard that and we went, "Whew, okay, that's pretty heavy." And then the next doctor came in, the one who would be doing the C-section, and said, "Okay, in these situations, you can always have bleeding, and so you might have to have a hysterectomy today." And I said, "Whew, that also is pretty heavy. My opportunity for having kids could be over today." But none of that happened. During the operation, they pulled the baby out. They were able to look at her and say, "It's a little girl, and she's going to make it." So they did everything they could to revive her. She got pretty stable, and they were able to not have to do an operation on me, and so we were able to look at each other and say, life was given to us today. So that was just a wonderful thank you, God, that we were able to have the life of our daughter and the potential for more children later. I'd also like to say thank you, God, for perfect timing. Again, she was 26 weeks along. I had just been put on bed rest 2 days before on a Tuesday. We were trying to make arrangements. We do have one daughter, Natalia, who's 2 years old, and going, "Oh my gosh, bed rest for 14 weeks is a really long time." So David called his mom, and she was able to come out. She came out Thursday night, the night that we had to go into the hospital. That was a huge praise that Natalia was able to still sleep. She had someone there to take care of her while we had to leave. That same day, April 16th, my parents were actually en route to the airport to go and visit my sister in Virginia. They had scheduled the trip weeks and weeks before and were happy to go and see where she lived for the first time. And I got the chance to call them as they were arriving at the airport and say, "I'm going to have a baby today, can you stay?" Perfect timing that they had not gotten on that airplane to go. So they were able to be at the hospital actually as the doctors were wheeling Gracie in her little carriage to the NICU. They were able to see her in the hallway and say, "Oh, is that the Lily's baby? Can we look at her?" Perfect timing. Let's see. The very first day that Gracie was having a hard time, it was the following Thursday when she was just about a week old. My parents had had all-day meetings, and Dave's mom was still in town. So she and Dave were at the hospital, and I was finally home with Natalia. I had been in the hospital for a few days, and I was finally home. I was just having a very nice, relaxed morning with her. My mom, in between meetings, decided she would just stop in, see how we were doing. As we sat casually chatting, my dad bursts in the door and says, "Why didn't you answer the phone?" And I was like, "It hasn't been ringing." I had accidentally left it off of the hook, and Dave had been frantically trying to reach me from the hospital. They weren't sure if Gracie was going to live 10 minutes and possibly 10 hours. So at that time, it was perfect because both of my parents were with me that first time that I had the thought that my daughter might not make it. She might actually be gone. And Dave had his mom at the hospital to also support him. That too was perfect timing. When it was time for her to go home, we were at peace. My sister mentioned later, if Gracie had passed away even a day earlier, we wouldn't have been ready for it. God had taken us from the place where we were so confident that she would live, we're not wavering from that, to a place of complete peace that she was going home. And that, again, was just God's perfect timing, that He had sustained her for that long before taking her home. And then finally, my parents were able to go on a trip right after Gracie passed away, and they needed that to recover, to be able to just kind of reconnect and rest up after this hugely traumatic experience. And during almost that entire time, my sister was able to come and visit with me, to just have someone with me all the time as I was processing, as just getting used to the fact that my daughter was gone. So God's perfect timing for that. I also want to say thank you, God, for friends. So many prayers were prayed on our behalf, and thank you. The very first Sunday after she died, I got up and my sister was visiting, and I said, it's so crazy. I don't really feel sad. I think people are going to be expecting me to just be a complete mess, and I'm not. And my sister said, Jonelle, you're probably one of the most prayed for people. Of course you're feeling good. The Lord is sustaining you. So thank you. Thank you for praying for us. I also want to say thank you to the people who provided us meals, the cards that supported us, the flowers that people sent that we planted in our garden and can look at now. It was also such a blessing. So many people who had gone through similar situations just reached out to us. They wrote letters, they talked to us, people who had been through the same things, and that can communicate you in a way that is just a sad club to be in. So thank you. I also want to say thank you, God, for unity. In the time of so much stuff going on, Dave and I were able to agree on everything. The very morning that she left, we were just praying. We had been there since 1:23 in the morning, and it was about 8 o'clock in the morning, and we kind of were just looking at each other, and we said, okay, it's time to hold her, which was kind of one of the last steps before letting her go. She'd been on a respirator, and that would be just the next step to letting her go home. And we just looked at each other and said, it's time. And then later, after we each had a chance to hold her, we said, it's time again to take her off the respirator and just let her go. And just thank you, God, that we had the unity on that. We also want to say thank you, God, for words of wisdom. So many times through my life, in particular, my mom has said, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, and God's grace is sufficient. Both of those things, how much they have sustained me. I really never thought that I would be able to handle having someone pass away. All through my life, I've just thought, oh, I would just be a puddle on the ground. I would never get up. And yet God really doesn't give us more than we can handle. And God's grace is sufficient. Even the morning that Grace was being born, I was actually awake during the C-section, and Dave and I were just talking, and I could just keep looking at him and say, God's grace is sufficient. God's grace is sufficient. And when she was born and they said, it's a little girl, we looked at each other and we just said, her name is Grace, because it's true. My sister also said, the morning that she died, maybe it's time that you need to tell her that it's okay that she can leave, that she can go home, that you guys will be okay. And we needed that word right at that time. As I mentioned earlier, we had been at the hospital since about, I guess we got there at about 2. We'd gotten the call at 1:23. And it was one of those things where we had just had so much confidence. It felt like we can't let her go. We can't say it's okay, because that would be giving up. But she needed to hear that. My sister said too, you know, Jonelle, she bounces back every time that you're near. You can tell how much she loves you because she's holding on for you. And maybe she shouldn't. Maybe you should just say, it's okay, you can go. And so we did. And that too was a good word of wisdom, to be able to release her, to be able to say, we're going to make it, and God is still faithful. And something our pastor said to me the week after she passed away, he said, you know, Jonelle, sometimes the questions why are too big to ask. We won't understand on this earth, really, why she had to go home, but it doesn't make sense to spend all of our time questioning why, because as he said, it's just too big of a question to ask. We won't get a satisfying answer here. I also want to say thank you, God, for peace. We had so much confidence that she would live right up until the morning that she went home. That is a tremendous, that was just a huge blessing for me, to be able to say, I don't need to be constantly living in a fear that she's going to die. I don't need to be just dreading that moment, because I had confidence that she would live. We knew that our God was big enough to heal her, and we just lived in that confidence.